Okay, folks, here we go. We have moved on. Video number 4 is the one that went over how to go in this direction. There's a lot of like review stuff there. So if you're watching this one first, you should go back. Make sure you watch that one because we talk a little bit about some of the things we're going to bring back in when we talk about graphing these three things and finding the equations. Now, here's the deal, man. Most of this stuff isn't too terrible, but it is going to take us kind of a minute to go back and forth with a few things. So if you look at it, well, look at this one. When I look at a graph, I tend to look at it and think to myself first, all right, where's that middle line, right? So our middle line here is at -2. What that's going to mean that we're going to have is that for something like this, it lets us know first the shape of the graph that is going to be a sine function. And because of the fact that I've got all this thing going down too, after whatever the hell is here, that's our fun part. And probably the most work today, we're going to have a -2. So the vertical shift is a -2 to bring it down. I can also check the amplitude. If I look here, it goes 3 above the midline and 3 below the midline. So our amplitude multiplier there is going to be a 3. Now, what happens inside here is going to be, well, not as much fun one might expect. We know that it follows the formula omega times x minus phi for the stuff that we're going to be doing. And so here's essentially what I would tell you we should do. That thing right there has almost nothing to do with this first one because we're basically going to set up those two equations that we have done before. We know we're going to have omega times x minus phi is going to equal, well, 0. And then omega times x minus phi is going to equal 2 pi. The thing that is going to be a little bit different with this is we are going to be figuring this out based upon what our x value is. So here, for the beginning part, -pi/2 is where we start. So in this case, the x value I'm going to be plugging in here is going to be -pi/2. And then if I look at the end part of it, right here, our end is at +3pi/2. So that's the value I'm going to put in here. Now, look, guys, I know you are all very intelligent individuals. And what that means is you know how many different variables we have here. It's kind of a lot to deal with. But what's about to happen is not going to be hard. All right. So here's what you're going to do. Right now, I'm just going to rewrite this one. Omega times -pi/2 minus phi is equal to 0. Y'all, I'm going to divide by omega. And what's great, because this is 0 and it will always be 0, that omega has nothing to do with this. This 0 divided by anything is 0. So right now I know that -pi/2 minus phi is equal to 0. So now all I have to do in the case of this for the phase shift is that if I add this to the other side, I'm going to get that -phi is equal to +pi/2. And if I go to both sides here, what I'm going to get is that this is phi is equal to -pi/2. Okay, how are we feeling so far? Good. I'm glad that you can answer this video. That means that right now I have enough to fill into this equation. This is always going to be an x. If this is a -pi/2, what I'm going to be doing here is making this a +pi/2 on the inside of the equation. Everybody okay? Now, that is not difficult. If I have a plus here, we've done this before in terms of the phase shift. If it's x plus pi/2, that means I'm shifting left pi/2, which is right here. Not difficult to do. Sorry, taking something away from my cat. He seems to be eating it, which is not a lot of fun. If you get a chance to see the cat, it'll be pretty cool too. All right, so here, that is going to be what we have for this part. I still need to figure out that omega, but now I have more stuff that I can plug in. I don't know the omega. I do know that at the end of this, that 3pi/2 part, that is what I'm going to do for my x. The other thing that I now know, because I figured this part out, I can just put that sucker right here, plus pi/2, and that's going to equal 2 pi. This is an easy freaking thing to figure out, okay? So when we're looking at this one, omega times 3pi/2 plus pi/2 is 4pi/2, which, hey guys, that's 2 pi. Now what we can do is divide both sides by 2 pi. and omega is equal to 1. Now, part of you are thinking, dude, it's just 1. And I know that you're thinking that, and it's fine. However, this thing that I just did here, when we get to the other ones, it is going to make life a lot easier that you've gone through a process like that to say, well, here's what I'm going to do. Now, let's look at the equation for a second. I'll write it right here. This is y is equal to 3 times x plus pi over 2 minus 2. Now, none of that's difficult. When you're looking at what's happening there, we got a phase shift of negative pi over 2. Hey, look, it goes that way. This period is 2 pi, which means we actually didn't change anything. So this is pi over 2, pi over 2, pi over 2, pi over 2. It's all good. And we moved everything down too. Easy peasy. The problem is you're going to get to things like this, and it's going to kind of suck. So let me tell you something that's going to be a little bit easier for us to start. I bet right now, just looking at this, you could tell me that the phase shift is, oh my gosh, that's 3 pi over 2. So I know automatically, without having to do anything else, that when I'm looking in the equation, it is going to be x minus 3 pi over 2 in there. Because when I do that thing with the 0, whatever I'm going to have left here is going to tell me where this is going to be at. That means the only thing that I really care about for this work is what do I do for the end? I am going to have to figure out what that multiplier is, and that's totally fine. They can put a little omega there because we'll have to figure it out. But let's look at the rest of the things that we know. We know right now that this is absolutely cosine. I could tell you that the midline is right here, which means we had to go up 3. So I'm going to put a plus 3 at the end of it. And if I look, my amplitude goes 2 above and below. I also know that because I started this negative part, this will be a negative 2. So we started down and went back up as opposed to the other direction. So all I have to do now is figure out that omega. And that does take a minute. It is going to involve that 9 pi over 2 pi. Okay? So what we're going to do is take this crazy mess here, omega times x minus 3 pi over 2. And remember that to find my end of this, we always had it equal to 2 pi, because that's the end of one of our periods. What we did just do, though, is to recognize that if my end here is that 9 pi over 2, that is what I'm going to be replacing the x with, which makes it pretty easy, right? So we'll have omega times whatever the hell 9 pi over 2 minus 3 pi over 2 is. Well, let's see. 9 minus 3 is 6. And so if I reduce that, 6 over 2 is just going to be 3 pi. All right. Well, the math here shouldn't be too terrible. Like right now, all I'm going to have to do is divide both sides by 3 pi to get whatever that omega is. These will cancel. The pi's will cancel. And I can tell you right now that omega is equal to the fraction 2/3. All right. So that means if I go back up to the equation that I started with up here, instead of omega, I'm going to write 2/3. And so this will be negative 2 cosine 2/3 x minus 3 pi over 2 plus 3. Now, I know that what we're doing is probably more of the mathematically complicated side of things. It's not that difficult to do, though, so make sure that you're paying attention and practicing this as you go through it. The last one that we're going to do is this sine graph. So let's do this for a minute. This is a maximum value. The midline appears to be right about here. And it appears to be done right there through that because it starts high, goes low, and goes back up high. This is a cosine graph because the distance from here to here is 2. It will be 2 times the cosine. It starts high, so it is a positive. I know there's some multiplier, I'm sure, but in the parentheses, because I did shift this direction, it's going to be a plus pi over 2. There's going to be some multiplier out here that I don't know. And this has moved up 3. Okay, so that's going to take us up this direction. That should be totally fine. That being said, we've got that guy there. We need to figure out this omega. So the part that's going to be the most important is to figure out what our end is. Our end is 5 pi over 2. So that is what I'm going to plug in right there to figure out omega. Okay, so my equation will be, I got a space over here so I can do it. This thing here, omega times that x becomes 5 pi over 2 plus the pi over 2 that was the phase shift and that is going to equal 2 pi. Okay. 5 plus the 1 is going to be 6 pi over 2, which we said, oh, it's the same one as before. All right, well, I guess Michener took it easy on us for this one. I like blaming him. It makes me feel better when I'm doing this. It means I didn't do this to you. So you guys can look at that and say, you fool. Okay, so we have 3 pi. There's omega. There's 2 pi. And similar to last time, if I divide them both, this will cancel. The pi's will cancel. And omega is equal to 2/3. So again, same equation up here. We will just have a 2/3 instead. The shift is x plus pi over 2. We got a plus 3. We got a plus 2. And we got y equals. Guys, we did it. Those are our 3 problems going from the graph to the equation. For real, if you can do these 3, you absolutely can do what we have on the final. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing, give you a thumbs up, and send you on your way.